Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I am your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me, my books, and blogs on dismantlingfamilycourtcorruption.com, as well as on Amazon and YouTube. Please like and subscribe. Also, I have one announcement. Please notify your Attorney General in your state regarding solar panels made by Sonova Generac Systems if you are having any difficulty with this company. Fill out the form, the complaint form in your Attorney General's state and let them know. I have a return guest on. I'm happy to have Attorney Kim Korven back on. She was last on season 5, episode 200 and 216, where the last time we talked, we discussed, is it divorce or is it conflict? And we had a great conversation there. Here today, we're going to talk about the set of rules post-divorce. And I welcome you back, Attorney Kim Korven. How are you this Saturday morning?
I am doing really well. How are you, Marianne? It's such a
I'm
pleasure to be here.
I'm so glad to have you on.
And the last time we spoke, after we quit recording,
Mhm.
you and I started having a conversation about new rules.
Uh-huh.
And it arose out of your situation. So when you and your husband first separated, first divorced, how was your relationship, the two of you?
It was a lot better. I had moved into well, you're gonna think this is crazy. I had to live with him through, August when I filed for divorce, up until he said, why don't you stay here so you can save to buy a house? So I stayed up until June 22nd. Then I moved into my farmhouse that was built in 1900. So we got along. It was kind of rocky. My attorney said, watch your back. I said, well, what do you mean? Because I'm so naive. He said, well, this is when a lot of domestic violence can happen, just warning you. Not never happened.
No, because I actually work with a lot of people who continue to live in the same space, share the space for a while for financial reasons.
Mhm.
So you saying this, I'm like, yeah, that makes perfect sense. And what a lovely gift to you to say, stay so you can save money. And you mentioned farmhouse,
Oh, I love my
1900.
farmhouse. Yeah.
Say more.
Oh, definitely. So I stayed, but like when I was packing some more, his mother had come over to help me pack, and he had a meltdown. And I mean, I jumped, I like, how you startle, and she startled too. So it's like, well, okay, now she can see what has been going on. And then I exited, but then things were better with the farmhouse because we also had an agreement. We did all of this ourselves. We did not go through attorneys except for the legal stuff of totally divorcing.
Mhm.
And so the agreement was that if anything broke in my house, because it was, old, even though it was well taken care of, he would help me fix it. He's handy like that. So when I walked in there, it's like I needed a new kitchen. I said, I'll buy the kitchen stuff. Tell me what I need to get. I'll buy it, and you help me install it. So we were hanging kitchen, what do you call them? The shelvings
The
units
cupboards.
above, the cupboards above. And then also the upstairs, I guess you'd call it a master bathroom. He put in the plumbing for the shower, and because it had a gooseneck shower head and the tub and the toilet and the vanity. So, and then I did all the tiling because I love to tile.
You are a multi-talented
Yeah.
woman. You are.
Well, the thing is, what I found was when I was tiling my bottom or the first floor shower, I mean, thank God we had two showers in that house. It was 5 bedrooms. And uh, it was on 1 acre, which I liked. It was so beautiful there. It really was. And I totally put my shoulder out. I had to go for an x-ray. And he said, I have what the baseball players get. I don't know what they call it, some type of shoulder thing.
Mhm.
I don't remember. It was like that was over 10 years ago, but I couldn't like use my shoulder for that anymore for 8 months, he said. But I did continue to put up backsplashes. I didn't care.
And so when did things, so it sounds like you had kind of like the fairy tale divorce originally
Oh,
that
people said that.
everybody longs for.
Hmm.
This it's friendly and you figured it out yourselves.
Right, right.
So what shifted?
Well, adding on to that comment, one of my friends said because I had invited him over to a Halloween party with his girlfriend at the time, who would later become his, wife. She said to him, "Oh, you're making this look so easy. I think I want to get divorced." But she wouldn't divorce her husband. They've been together for, high school, since high school. But anyway, what shifted was when he married this woman who worked in the courthouse. She did not like that at the end of the kitchen project, I decided to put utility cabinets on the other side of the wall because I needed more storage.
Mhm,
And he could install them, and he found a fancy way to install them to make them look like furniture. I said, "Great." I said, I have Monday off. It was a holiday over here. I think it was Memorial Day, I think. And so he came over and he was in a huff and he was angry. And he said, "I can't be coming over here and doing these things. Do you have a 2x4?" And I said, "I have pieces of 2x4." So, I grabbed those and he was just yelling at me. And I said, God doesn't like swearing. I was trying to joke around.
mhm.
And once he was, swinging the hammer and he hit his thumb with the hammer as he was swearing at me.
Well, of course, because when, it comes back
I
one
know, it's
way
like,
or the other.
oh, I don't know, maybe God was trying to tell him something, but I think she was putting the screws to him that she did not like him coming over here. Bear in mind, I, was in between boyfriends because the other boyfriend helped me put in the second floor bathroom, the sliding glass doors to the shower bathtub area.
Yes.
So he did that. I didn't call up the ex to do that. But when you're in between boyfriends and you need help, this was our agreement. He should have
Hmm.
said, "Sorry, this is our agreement. I'm going to run over and do this real quick. I'll be right back." Believe me, she has no interest in me. She knows we're living together. It's a simple spell out. But then things continued to, I learned from that, don't ask him for anything else. Just don't.
So
Because some,
it was like you were back in the last part of your marriage before you decided to separate with his behavior. Fair assessment?
yes. Yeah, because of his behavior, that's what I decided and why I had to. And I had told you about that dream, right? I told you about that dream I had.
Well, you better tell everybody else.
Oh,
You're
I
mentioning the
mean,
dream.
I can't remember. I forgot. Well, not forgot, but I didn't listen to our last podcast. What led me to the divorce was he told me about this dream he had. He woke up in the morning and he said, "Oh my God, I had this dream. I killed you." I said, "What?" He said, "I dreamt I was downstairs scrubbing the basement walls because there was blood all over the walls and the police were on their way and I knew they were going to shine that black light on the cement walls and they were going to see the blood splatters." And this is when people were watching, say, Unsolved Mysteries,
Hmm.
shows like that, right? And I thought to myself, why would he even? Well, you have no control over your dreams. Maybe that was the way his mind was telling him that the marriage was over. Okay, so I interpreted it as you better get out now. Like you better start planning an exit.
Hmm.
I don't know. And then a couple weeks later, I told him that I'm going to get divorced and find a man that really loves me and not a man that says, "I'm trying to love you." This is so hard.
I'm trying. I'm trying. What more
Yeah,
do you want?
I know. And if you want to ask my current husband, I'm no problem to have a relationship with. I never heard that out of my current husband's mouth.
Well, people grow in different directions. So
Right.
the hanging the utility cupboards to give you extra space in the kitchen turned out to be this big blow up. Did things recover or what happened next?
Oh,
Because of course you have kids.
right. We continued our back and forth. It was 5 days on, 5 days off. We came up with that. And then we said with the holidays, I'll take them Christmas Eve to Christmas Day, then you take them at 1 p.m.,
Hmm.
spend time with your family till the next day. And well, then we'll just continue. We work things out. But that woman inserted herself in a co-parent relationship, had no problem doing so and threatening me on the phone to the point where I had to write a letter to her boss in the probation department of the Erie County Courthouse, letting him know that she stated, I know a lot of people in the courthouse and I'm friends with all the judges. And by the way, here's a picture that her sister took of this woman sitting on the couch with my three children. And underneath it, it said, This is my sister with her three children. So I sent him a picture of that. This is what I'm dealing with. And that was on Facebook. So I was able to take a screenshot.
Hmm.
And I was horrified to see that. She was also forcing them to call her mom. And the oldest one was not verbalizing that she hated the step, you know,
Yeah.
she was not, I didn't ask. Like, I didn't ask because I didn't know there was anything, any yelling or anything going on at that house with this woman.
It's so funny because when I think about so my situation, I live with my second husband in the house that my first husband and I bought, right? So I got the house after the divorce.
Mm,
And it was so interesting in the early and in between, like it wasn't I the kids and I rented out the house. I went back to university in another city, right? And then came back. So it was like fresh space.
mhm,
Except when my former spouse would come to pick up the kids and he would park in the driveway because it drove my current spouse nuts. And I'm like, it means nothing. Like, yeah, he's playing this little, don't worry about it. Like, it means nothing.
mhm,
And my former spouse, too, he lived the first X number of years, he just lived in a bachelor suite. And the kids were with me most of the time, and they were little. So when they were with him, like people were sharing beds and sleeping on a couch, two kids and him.
mhm,
And my current spouse would be like, that's really bad, Kim. Like he should be living better. And I'm like, look, he holds down a very responsible job. He
mhm.
always pays child support. The kids, I'm not seeing them come home acting,
Right,
because kids don't talk about it. You see it in their behaviors. They're
right.
acting fine. There's lots of people in the world more people live in much smaller spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And even when I was back at university living in a residence for families, there was one couple had 8 kids living in an apartment 630 square feet,
Mm.
right?
Wow.
Like
Wow.
people live, people live in much smaller spaces. Everything is going well. I am not, like, no, I'm not going to.
Mhm.
This is not an issue. Like it was an issue in his head.
Yeah, rock the boat. Why rock the boat if it's working?
But if people don't have that level of awareness, like your former spouse, oh, okay. And like a lot of the people who end up needing mediation with me,
Hmm.
it's these kind of things have happened. Just doing what the new spouse wants.
Hmm.
And I know, like my brother, two of his kids, they're in their early 30s now, have nothing to do with their dad because of this kind of situation.
Mm.
right? And and so I mean, so part of it for me was I already knew the situation with my brother's family was already in the works by the time I was divorced. And so I was seeing the start of it play out.
Hmm.
So one of the things when I started dating again was I committed to putting my kids first.
Oh, yes.
Now, did you and your husband, did you have a discussion about what happens? This is when things were going well. What happens when one of us starts dating again?
We had talked about it because, like I had said, when I told him I wanted a divorce, I'm going to find a man who loves me for me.
Hmm.
So he knew that. And I think I had said on the last podcast that I set him up with this woman to date with a mutual friend, to get dating experience. You don't have to marry the first thing that crawls across your plate.
No.
No, and the thing is, the other friend that helped me set up this thing neglected to tell me other things about this woman that I should have known about, that she was what she stated was very experimental in the SEXUAL department. And had I
Mhm.
known that, bells would have gone off. It's like, no, I'm not going to set him up on a date with her. I'm not that stupid. You know, also, I should have done a background check on her. That probably would have helped. I don't know if it would or not because she had a job, but she was living with relatives. She couldn't afford to live on her own. So when she sees money bags coming along, there's your meal ticket. She moved in within 2 weeks after one phone call, 4 hours long. And in 7 months, they got married.
And I mean, and this is the thing, like the coercive control, your spouse may not be coercive control, but can end up in a relationship with somebody who is that way. And I guess like I'm really fortunate in that I did see what was happening with my brother. I like it wasn't I never called it coercive control, right? I just knew he's estranged from his kids and it all started with a new partner. And and
Uh,
so it was and so when I looked at dating, like I had a list and it was and my thought process was, you know, my kids are going to be forever.
hmm.
Definitely. Like nearly half of all marriages end in divorce. So it was if somebody can't accept that my kids come first,
Hmm.
I'll find somebody else.
Oh, same
I
here.
was right, very, very clear. And if people, I think, haven't done that kind of analysis, and I mean, and you said she wanted your kids to call her mom. That just always makes me squirm.
Oh, I know. In fact, two judges said, do not do this. What do? They continue their behaviors.
Well,
They
they're
just,
not, see, that's part of the issue with the court system is
hmm.
it's you and your spouse, and new partners and kids are not actually parties. So when
No.
this new spouse isn't a party to the court action, a court order doesn't bind their behavior.
Hmm.
And how many people like to do what somebody else tells them to do? Do you, when somebody says you must do this?
Right. Well, the judges admonish both parties, right?
Hmm.
Okay. So it's like, well, you're preaching to the choir. I didn't say that to her, but I'm just saying, I'm like, I'm not, you know, they have to make both parties feel bad for some reason.
Like this is not, and you're right, you know, and it's something, right? Like if I'm doing mediation, yes, I have to. And if I'm giving somebody the
Right.
wake up call, and I usually do that privately, I will have a private conversation with the other person to keep it level.
Hmm.
And I think it would be, wouldn't it be great if there was a bit more honesty
Yeah.
about your behavior is appalling?
Hmm. Right. Um, it got, things had spiraled downward more as years went on because they got married in 2007 and
Mhm.
it was getting rocky and rockier and rockier, and then I married in 2011, and that's when hell broke loose in 2012. And they involved attorneys. I didn't involve attorneys to start co-parent counseling. And I'm like, what? How do you see a counselor? I'm a lifer with a counselor because I've had to deal with people that need to go to counseling.
Mhm.
Okay. And
It's
so,
healthy to go to counseling.
right, right. And, my one of my children had anger issues. I wanted him to see someone. Then he had to fight me on that. It had to be a counselor he picked, had to be a psychologist he picked. It was always like this. Luckily, my attorney knew these counselors for the co-parent counselor. He said, "Oh, she's good. Go to her. We like her." Then he said, "Oh, they picked this one here. She's a problem to the family law community." It's like, what does that mean? I said, okay, well, the middle one was seeing a guy, a male counselor for anger issues, which helped a lot. He did his job.
Mhm.
And I think I may have said this on another podcast was that uh, he had finished his counseling and I was coming down the hall and the boys were in their rooms and my current husband he had sold his motorcycle and bought flooring and put brand new flooring in the house in all the rooms. And the youngest one took a toy and slammed it on the floor. And so the middle one looked at him and said, "You can't throw things like that. Your wife won't like that." And when I heard that, I just went right to my room and I just went, I did my job. So that one knew. And I know kids throw things in anger here and there, but when it gets to be a pattern, that's when you've got to get some help in here to stop those behaviors so they don't ruin somebody else's life.
Well, yeah, and it's often I think with kids, they don't have the language
No,
and they don't want to say anything bad
right.
about the other parent. So you see it in their actions. And I've always remembered Dr. Nadine Burke Harris. She did a TEDx talk about adverse childhood experiences, and
Mm,
that was when I first learned of them. But she was a pediatrician and she was seeing all of these kids with ADHD. And statistically, it was way higher than
mhm.
one would expect. So she's like, what is happening to these children? And discovered, oh, adverse childhood experiences, right? We see it in the children's behavior.
Right.
If there's emotional neglect, emotional abuse,
Mm,
because often we were evolved enough as a society that the physical abuse, physical neglect are, I think, quite rare compared to the emotional abuse would be, I've dealt with enough people, I would say
yeah.
that's the real challenge. And of course, when you have a parent like having mental health issues, lots of us have mental health
Mm,
issues, but if they're not regulated, if they're not properly managed,
hmm.
if you have a parent who overconsumes a substance,
Hmm.
doesn't have to be an addiction. These are all adverse childhood experiences.
Right.
And they say divorce is an adverse childhood experience, is one of, but what's interesting is there's research on conflict that I've mentioned before that the conflict, the behavioral, the academic issues start while the parents are still living together.
Hmm. Hmm.
And conflict, of course, is tension, it's passive aggressive behavior. It doesn't have to be that physically violent, the yelling.
Hmm.
And so our kids take it in and they express it. And as a parent, and you're trying to support your kids love the other parent, there's Maryann. dealing with, like, how did you do it? What did you do with this new spouse, this new mom?
Yeah, that was an eye opener. I had no idea someone could be that vengeful. That, if you know all these people and leading us down the path to family court going in there, I didn't want to go in there. I did not file to go in there. He was the one that he filed an emergency petition on his birthday, like don't ever do anything on your birthday, people, right? And so he filed an emergency petition and he paid two counselors and of course the attorney to show up. We go before the judge. He wanted an emergency petition to remove only the one child, not the other two. I found that very strange. I saw that as a red flag.
From your
Yes.
care, to
Yes, because
remove one child out of three from your care, and the other two were fine. So,
right.
what did the court find? I'm
Well,
curious.
he was saying that I was mentally ill, so was the child. So it's like that makes no sense. So the judge saw through it. She
Hmm.
said, keep everything status quo. And she ended it. Oh, how she ended it was no one calls the stepmother mom. That is what I do recall. I don't have the transcript of that one, but I remember her saying that. And she was very stern.
Well,
Uh,
because I'm just going. Of course, the judge saw through it, because saying one child and not all three, like, if you're concerned about mom has mental health issues and you're saying, oh, that's only going to affect one child, like, no, like, it's logically, it doesn't make sense,
right.
right? And I mean, and I have seen in court, oh, yeah, dad hit mom and she got a domestic violence order, but that was mom. He won't do that to the kids.
Mhm.
Distinguishing that way, but distinguishing one child from other kids, no.
Yeah, that was just a stupid move. And then when we were walking out of the courthouse, we didn't have that order yet that it would be status quo, but it
Hmm.
didn't look good for him. So as I was walking back, I had this new attorney and I said, well, guess what? It's his birthday today, too. And she goes, well, happy birthday to him. You know, we didn't know things were going to get worse. That's the scary part is people don't know what can happen next.
Well, and we think that you get a court order and everything is going to be fine, but not everybody complies with a court order, right? And this is part of the thing about nobody likes to be told what to do.
Hmm.
So for example, it's like about a year ago, I get this message on Facebook from this woman, "Hey Kim, do you remember me?" And I look at her name and I respond, "Well, given that I only ever had an RCMP officer in the back of the courtroom, who on a break then asked the other party for his shoelaces, belt, and wallet, given that that only happened once in my legal career, of course I remember you."
Mm.
Because that was a fellow who refused to pay alimony, refused to pay child support, had done, and he was horrific in terms of trying to avoid paying. And we had brought an application for contempt of his refusal
Hmm.
to comply with the court order. And the judge saw through him and ordered a police officer to be there to arrest him. And that's right, that's why the wallet, the
Yeah.
belt, the shoelaces, this guy was going to go to jail.
Mm.
And that's when this guy decided he better play. But what people don't know is, in any, like, even a contract dispute, if the court orders that, this other side is going to pay you damages, which is money,
Hmm.
they don't have to voluntarily pay.
Hmm.
You might have to seize money out of their bank account, send the sheriff to get some of their property. It isn't Just because the order exists doesn't mean anything. If people are inclined to go, now you can't make me do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make this hard for you. That's what happens.
See, over here, um, I had won pension fund monies
Hmm.
that he was hiding from the courts. I said to the lawyer, are these worth even fighting for? We don't even know how
Oh, yeah.
much is involved, right? We don't even know. And the judge ruled that it wasn't important because he was in collusion with the opposing attorney. Okay. So that's really how this was rolling out. So my attorney said, look, I can tell you're being railroaded. I'll only charge you $1,500 to go to Superior Court of Pennsylvania and argue for the pension fund because I believe the judge is wrong. And I said, why not? I can gamble with that. And
Hmm.
it proved we won. So it had to go back down to the lower court where they just muddied the waters. And in the process of doing that, they gave him full custody of the two younger. They were like 12 and 13, 13 going on 14. Unbeknownst to this kids, this was happening on March 2nd of 2015. And so when the judge announced that he has full sole custody, the wife, her three sisters, one of her other sisters, who also, I believe, worked in the courthouse, and her mother and his parents all jumped up laughing, whooping, clapping, and cheering. There was no slamming of the gavel saying, order in the court. Oh, he just let that carry on for minutes and minutes and minutes. And my attorney looked at me like, what just happened? And then she said, let them leave first. We are going to stay here till they're out of the way.
Hmm.
So when we left the courtroom, it's twisty and turny, right? So we see this I can't even, I want to say step monster for lack of a better word. She was dressing frumpy. Okay, I think there's a reason for that. I dressed kind of like business type. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so she was, she went from laughing and clapping, and we go out in the hallway, and she's crying her eyes out to her sisters. And my lawyer looked at me and said, what does she have to be crying about? I said, I don't know. I really don't.
She didn't really want the kids. She wanted to make your life hell.
Right.
That's why she was crying, right?
And she's still doing it to this day. So I think people should really, like you said in the beginning, like, did you guys discuss what would happen if we would meet? I think even if we had an agreement, okay, so if you remarry and I remarry, we've got to tell these new spouses to stay out of the co-parent relationship. I don't think that would have happened with these two.
Well, I think though, if the two of you had had the conversation about there's no calling a new partner mom or dad because it's like a good attorney, if you're doing representing a client who's starting a new business with their best friend,
Hmm.
they go through all of that. What happens if you can't talk? What happens if, right, if you're not getting along? And you can end up with what's called a unanimous shareholders agreement, where it's all spelled out. Boom, boom, boom.
Hmm.
And if people really value their kids, that's the level, the granular level to get to when you're getting, when things are going well. Like if you're working with a mediator, because part of the thing about working with a mediator or negotiating yourselves, it recognizes, the process recognizes you're the expert of your family,
Hmm.
right? And to be able to have the discussion, like sometimes my clients even, it's like, well, I don't want him to know where I am, when you've got the kids. And it's like, is this about control? No, it's if something happens to the kids when they're away, I need to know. Oh, okay. Right. To be able to have that kind of discussion. And about like people, your kids are your kids forever. And this new spouse may not last or may make your life hell.
Hmm.
So, and really when and I remember, thank goodness for my second husband, because my daughter at one time was wanting to call him dad. And he said, "You already have a dad. I'm Jeff." Recognizing, and unfortunately our language is such that we don't have the language for the step parents.
Hmm. Hmm.
Now I'm curious, do you have those two kids who in 2015 were 12 and 13? So it was all of a sudden for them, it's like, oh, by the way, you have to go live with your dad and you see me every second weekend, or
Right. Well, I wasn't even allowed, I was given no contact orders, holidays and or Mother's Day. Big,
so your kids went from having this physical relationship with you, and nobody is a perfect parent. So of course we're all going to do things sometimes that, oh well, it happens because we're human. So they went from having this loving relationship with
Mhm.
mom to
Right.
no relationship. And what is the impact on the children?
Oh, it was bad because that Tuesday I was supposed to pick them up at school because it was my time to have them. So I don't know what they went through when someone else was picking them up, and I don't even know who that was.
Right? Like it's just, think about the
Mhm.
kids, and if when you get on this kind of a train,
Yeah.
because my heart just goes out for your kids. They're going to need therapy for life.
Oh, exactly. They
They're
have
not going to trust anybody.
no, and they have stomach issues.
Well, it's like I said, right? About
They-
they don't have the language. They can't actually communicate, like the power imbalance between parents and kids.
Mhm.
And because kids love their parents, they're not going to say, "Oh, you suck." I mean, in anger, they might, like my daughter has said a few times when she was mad at me, "You're the worst mom ever." And I'm just like, "Oh, I guess I'm doing my job."
Right.
Because it was things that mattered, that
Hmm.
kept her safe. Um, but so, of course, your kids have stomach issues.
Another, I'm sure. And simultaneously, when that had happened, I was under a false allegation of emotional child abuse on the oldest one, who is 16 going on 17, because there's certain things I don't allow in my house, like boys up in the bedroom, just
Mhm.
normal parent, things that are like that. So she chose to leave the house, and then there was levied a emotional abuse indication. I had been a nurse for 23 years with an exemplary record. If I was emotionally abusive or a nutcase, I'd have been fired a long time ago. And so we had to fight that. And my attorney was brilliant at fighting that. So I was grateful for that. And then the judge, even though I had gotten cleared from that charge, he continued the false narrative that I was emotionally abusive because they were all in it together.
That's just horrific,
It
right?
gets better because I was cleared, and then I called the hospital and I said, "Hey, I can come back to work in the ER." They were like, "Oh, thank God," because they're always running short of nurses.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
then it's like, okay, we have new uniforms. They gave me, an expenditure thingy to go buy uniforms and shoes and whatever.
Right.
Did all that. 4 days later, I get a call from a CPS caseworker who's very abrasive, rude, and obese, telling me that you're being indicated for emotional abuse on the middle child now. And it's like, I said, go call my attorney, and I hung up on her. And then I called my attorney. I said, guess what? So we had to fight that. Simultaneously, over here in Pennsylvania was a case called Commonwealth versus Sandusky, where they had to, well, what the result of that was, I'll make it short. The result of that was teachers, nurses, doctors, everybody had to have background checks, fingerprints, and
Hmm.
child abuse clearances in. Right. So I had this emotional abuse indication. The hospital had to have all of this in by November 23rd of 2015. I could do the other two, the state police background check and the fingerprints. I couldn't do the child abuse clearance because my hearing with CPS wasn't until December 4th of 2015. So I was involuntarily terminated.
So they
And
wrecked your career too.
yes, while coming after me for child support. And then my attorney was brilliant again. She got all of that expunged because we went, through a hearing, and that judge saw through it. And by January 6th, I was cleared of those charges. And I have a letter from my attorney stating that I was a target of CPS. Actually, it's OCY over here in Pennsylvania.
Okay.
But so they would not hire me back. The hospital wouldn't hire me back because they knew there was a third child. They know how this goes.
Yes.
So they're not going to put any more time into me, and no other hospital would hire me because word got around. Then he expected me to pay 800 in child support. When we had divorced, when we talked amongst ourselves, he said, "Well, can I pay 600 a month in child support?" I said, "That's fine." He said, "Do you want spousal, or alimony?" I said, "I don't need that. That's stupid. I'm a nurse.
Hmm.
I can function. I just might need some help." I said, 600 is fine because he explained to me, he said, "This is what my attorney told me, that I would end up paying not only for you to live in the house, I would have to pay you 2,400 a month in child support. That would only leave me like 400 a month to live on, and I would have to live with my parents."
Hmm.
I said, "Oh, that's stupid." I said, "I'm buying this farmhouse. I'm going to make my new dreams with this farmhouse. And, that's fine, whatever you want to pay me." I'm very agreeable.
So I'm curious, Maryann, what advice would you have? Because your situation is truly horrific, like
It's also,
truly horrific.
don't you want to go
So
like this? And the thing is, his attorney, that he was telling him, like, just be careful because you could be paying out her all this money. He said it was so good. He said, "You better be good to her." That's what he told him. To which
his
I was
first
very great.
attorney.
Yeah, I appreciate him telling him that. Well, that didn't happen.
But what advice? Like what number one piece of advice? And given everybody who you've talked to for the podcast too, is there one piece of advice first off, and if there is, and right,
I
like
was,
what mhm.
oh, I don't want to interrupt you either.
No, no, it's okay. I asked one question. I was going to rephrase it, and I just went, no, Kim, no, no, let her answer this one.
Okay, so what I suggest are two things. You do not move fast in relationships. You do not date within 3 months and decide to marry someone. Let time go by and let the mask fall off. Do your background checks. I at that time back in 2007, I didn't think to do a background check or really investigate what I just never thought of doing that, hiring a private investigator. What I suggest to couples that are marrying, do background checks on his and her relatives. Because if anybody works in the courthouse, if anybody is tied to a police department, fire department, or otherwise in a position of power, do not marry them. Because chances are, and I hate to say this, the relationship may not work out and they will screw you over in court. It will happen. I've talked to too many parents with an individual seated in that courthouse. I'm sorry to say that. But this is it's happened to me. It's happened to other parents. I don't mean
Well,
to
I'm
be,
listening to you, and like I haven't been putting, I have people discuss these things, and I usually, my lawyer cap has kept me from putting some of these things in the agreement, but I think they need to be in the agreement to protect the kids,
right.
about um, if I get together with somebody else, no, not going to call the kid mom. I'm not going to start an action, to change up our parenting regime. Like my kids come first before my new spouse.
Oh, yes, yes. Even when I was dating decent guys because, you know, when you divorce, you have to remember, my one friend said, okay, you're divorced, you marry up. You don't marry down. You're married to a vice president of a company. Okay, so he's calling himself floor manager in court. He also hid other things like an international patent from the court as well. Meanwhile, he's yelling at the judge to put me in jail because I couldn't pay child support. Is that how you treat a parent of your
So
child?
what did the judge write like about your whole the saga with your work? And I understand, right, needing the clearance. It makes sense to me, right?
Right, right.
Because you're dealing with people who are
And
in a
children.
vulnerable state,
Mm-hmm.
right? It makes sense. But it sounds to me like they knew that and they deliberately wrecked your career
Yes.
and then wanted child support. What did the court do with that? I'm
Oh,
curious.
they ran with it because we went from Judge Sambrook, who was the family court judge who went along with the charade and
Mhm.
continued it. And he met his demise 2 years later, would you believe, on March 2nd of 2017, because I couldn't recuse him. I said, God, I don't know what to do. He's destroyed my family. You deal with him now. So God did. So on March 2nd of 2017, he died of pancreatitis. Okay. And it's just ironic. It was on the same day he took my kids away. But we ended up with a child support judge, which was Judge Elizabeth Kelly, who continued the charade, would not listen to the past. She had no interest on how I lost everything.
Well, but and I'm just going to explain to you why. Because those were matters that were already adjudicated, and to listen to them, it's like giving you a chance at double jeopardy, which doesn't happen in the court system. So she could not go back, okay? She
But
couldn't look at them. It
how,
had to be something new.
but I mean, maybe it's new to her that through two false allegations, I was made to lose my job and I was cleared of this. None of this should have happened to begin with.
And it's so, but I'm like, right, because it's when a court makes a decision about something, it's done. And if you don't appeal or don't win an appeal, and appeals are very, very difficult to win because
Hmm.
it isn't what happens as a judge is each party supplies you with evidence. You have to take it and decide what are the facts, right? What's more likely than on a balance of probabilities, 51%, what's likely to be the truth. Appeals are not based on the judge misapplied the facts, didn't get the facts right. Appeals are was the law misapplied, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
That's how you win an appeal. And most appeals, people want to appeal on the facts.
Hmm.
But when a judge makes that ruling on the facts, they're done. And so the fact that, yes, the decision didn't make sense, but that's the decision. And usually, like to change custody and such, then there has to be a change in circumstances, a
Hmm.
material change in circumstances. You can't be arguing. And this is just a bit of tough love, right? Tough information.
Hmm.
But that's what was happening, just so you know, an
Okay.
insider's perspective.
Well, it got grueling because people, I think parents kind of know how this goes that have been through this. You go through support contempt conferences, then you go through support contempt hearings, which are almost like every 2 weeks. And then the judge demanded I pay $2,000 or spend 2 months in jail.
Mhm.
And the ex was there rooting. Yeah. He even ran up to the rail. I have everything in transcript. So I thought, well, I could have the $2,000, but I won that pension fund. They just wouldn't pay it. I- So it just never got paid out. And his attorney was so sneaky. He said, well, like it was months earlier, he said, well, we can put that towards the arrears. Had that been done, I could have avoided jail at that time. But they just didn't do it. The judge didn't sign the order. The family court judge did not sign the order to have that done. So they, in fact, uh, got my demise going that way. So what I did was I ended up in jail right the day after Mother's Day for 5 days, and I was getting sick. My 79-year-old father paid the purge amount, the extortion amount of 2000. And then
Hmm.
5 months later, I had a major heart attack with 3 stents to the LAD. And during that time between the jail and the heart attack, I was filling out an appeal to the Superior Court of Pennsylvania on this child support because she is out of control. And I wrote it up and I was like really happy. I sent it in 1 day late. I thought, oh no, but they
Yep.
accepted it,
Okay.
right? They
I
accepted
know 1 day late, it's like you missed the deadline. Too bad, so
I know,
sad.
right? And so I get a letter later saying that we don't want anyone coming in and arguing. We have too many cases. We don't, there's going to be too many lawyers here. We don't want anyone coming in to argue because I just loved going in there to argue because I had to defend myself. And I wanted them to hear my story, but I thought, well, maybe God wants me to shut up. So time went by. It was December 27th, and I got a thin letter from the Superior Court of Pennsylvania. And I was laying on the couch, and my husband kind of threw the mail on my chest. He goes, "I don't know, it's here." And it's like, oh God. You have to force yourself to open the envelope,
Hmm.
and it says vacated and remand, which means you won, but you have to take it back down to the lower court. I had been pro se at this time, and I had to tell my husband, I said, I hate to do this, but we have to get an attorney. I can't handle this judge. She is not handleable. She does not, she's not fit to be around people either.
So
So,
in in Canada, there's a judicial council
mhm.
and that people can make complaints about judges too.
Oh, I did.
So
Later.
so there is okay, yeah, good.
Oh, yeah. Um, yeah, in fact, that was done about 2 years ago. And she suddenly went into early retirement. I had a friend help me write a letter. That's another, but still they made her a senior judge so they can call her in because now they're short on judges.
Yeah.
They can call her in and she can still destroy people's lives. And not just mothers,
A
but
super
fathers.
a supernumerary judge is
Right.
is the word, yeah.
Well, I hired a Supreme Court attorney who looked at everything and she says, I wish I knew you a year ago because none of this should have happened. I said, I wish I knew about you a year ago too, you know? And she says, okay, I'm going to take your case. And I said, well, since you're a Supreme Court attorney, what is this? What is your retainer? She said, it's 4,000. I said, okay, you're like everybody else. I said, okay, here's a charge card. Swipe away. And she was so good. She drove up in a snowstorm because we had to, we were vacated and remanding going before Judge Kelly again. In a
Hmm.
snowstorm, she's 15 minutes late. And the court clerk came out and said, is she coming? I said, she's on her way, but if she doesn't get here, get this. We're not doing this today. And I said it just like that, really loud. And she says, okay, okay. And she kind of turned and walked back to the chambers. And then my attorney came in, and it was brilliant. The attorney came in, and I went to say object. She grabbed my hand and she said object. We were like objecting at the same time. And we were sustained all the time. The ex and his attorney were overruled all the time. It was amazing. My attorney said to the judge, Judge Kelly, you have to abide by what the Superior Court ruled. And it was like, whoa. Then the judge says, you two get over here. And I told my attorney, I said, ask for the W-2. And I should have said, ask about the patent. I didn't think of it at the time, which is too bad.
Hmm.
But she knew about this pension fund issue. I mean, and so she got a look at everything and she even mailed me his W-2. So I saw what he was making. And I'm gathering they're hiding money. You just know. Uh, but anyway, I said, what do we do with this pension fund? Because really, he owes me $2,200. Really, can you believe that? I paid a lawyer $1,500 to argue this, and it was only worth $2,200. Why not come up and say, hey, the pension fund's only worth $2,200. You want it, have it. Who cares?
Right.
But no, that would be too easy. So she had to again come back into court. She's driving almost 2 hours. So I'm paying her driving time back and forth. So at
Hmm.
this point, she wanted attorney fees because this not
Yeah.
shouldn't have happened either. So she's going before another good judge, and he was reading the riot act to the opposing attorney. I have that transcript. She said it was hilarious. And like, well, why didn't you do this? If this was ordered, why didn't this happen? Why wasn't this put on the arrears like you said? And he was up, that's what she said.
Because an attorney is an officer of the court, right? Which
Yeah.
means you follow the law. And if there's a court order, you're duty bound to say to your client, you comply with the law.
He didn't. Complaints on him too. Not that they went anywhere. But my attorney told me, she said, I took this judge's order because, of course, they ruled in our favor. And she took the order down to domestic relations, made them put it through, and she brought the arrears down to like $8,000, which I shouldn't even be doing that either. She knows that. She had told me what she fully intended to do when we went in there to argue the first time is to wipe away everything, the child support, the arrears.
Expunge them. Yeah.
None of this should be happening. She says, I don't know how this judge is going to rule. And I said, yeah, the nurses that I worked with said they call her crazy Judge Kelly, just so you know. And I said, oh, great. But we got the order back, and my attorney calls me. She says, you're not going to believe this. I've never seen anything so crazy in my life. I can't believe how crazy this order is written. And it was just haphazardly. I said, I can't understand it. She says, okay, she took your child support payment from $800 down to $106 a month. Can you handle that? I said, well, I guess my current husband's going to have to pay it because I've had a major heart attack. No one's going to hire me as a nurse anyway. So I guess he's going to have to handle that. She said the arrears, get this. She took the arrears from 11,000 down to that. No, no, no. She took the arrears from 15,000 down to 11,000. So that's kind of generous of her, right? But then when we got the arrears put or the pension fund back in there, that brought it back down to 8,000. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense.
Yep.
Okay, so she said they're making you pay $10 a month on the arrears. I just bust out laughing because he was so mad because when we signed up, we had to go down to the child support office to sign off on the middle one who was graduating.
Yes.
And that's when I brought up the patent. I printed up the whole stack. I mean, it was like this thick of patent papers. And I said, let's talk about this patent. And I slammed it on the table. His attorney was not there. So it was just him and me and this referee. And I said, tell me more. My attorney wants your 1044, your 1099, and your W-2. We need to know what this patent is worth. And he got all red. He looked like he was going to cry. He turned sideways, threw his leg over the other, and said, no, no, I can't. If I give you that, you're going to put it on social media. And I said, I'm a pro se, but I need this paperwork. My attorney wants to see it. So the referee said, Mr. So and so, she's entitled to this paperwork even though she's a pro se. He wouldn't do it. He wouldn't give it. She went to three supervisors, bringing them back, telling him he just wouldn't do it. See, if you're the target parent, you're going to lose either way. People need to know
Yep.
this. They let him do his little thing.
And see, that's the thing. When there is coercive control,
Hmm.
in the mix. And as we've been figuring out here, it doesn't have to be your former spouse.
Hmm.
It can be this person's new spouse,
Right.
pulling the strings. But when there is coercive control in the mix, they use the legal system to perpetuate the abuse.
Hmm.
And they do it very, very effectively.
Yes. In fact, because you had said that to me during our last podcast after we were recording, it's like, gee, that didn't dawn on me that perhaps she was coercively controlling him and instilling him and brainwashing him on what to do.
But that's what happens with coercive control,
Hmm.
right? The gaslighting is unrelenting.
Hmm.
And it starts out, that this is the absolute perfect partner, and they get together really, really quickly, and they isolate this person from their support network.
Hmm.
And it could be, like I've talked to men who are in coercively controlling relationships
Hmm.
and home 5 minutes late, and it's you're having an affair, you're hiding money, like all of it. And it's really, really sad.
Yeah, it was a
Um,
shame that this played out the way it did when none of this had to happen. Why put the kids through this?
well, and the impact, of course, is parental alienation.
Hmm.
And I've always remembered um, I was court appointed counsel on a child protection file, and my client found a social worker to work with her. And I mean, my client was unstable.
Mm.
And she ended up we have legal aid here. So people like this woman can get free legal representation.
Hmm.
But I don't know what somebody said to her at that office, but she'd thrown a garbage can across the room so they wouldn't touch her.
Hmm. Mm.
So a friend of mine who did child protection work said, Kim, will you take this on? Okay.
Oh my.
So when we first would go, and we had a really wonderful judge who met with us several times. And my client had recruited the social worker, and about the first 3 times we met with the judge, there was an RCMP officer in the back of the room, because they were expecting my client to go unhinged. She never did. She had the support that she needed. And she ended up, like she got the help, she did the work, she was parenting half time
Hmm.
by the end of it because she wouldn't give up on her kid, and that was my job, was represent mom.
Hmm.
But the social worker would always say, kids love their parents no matter what, right? Like no matter what the parent does,
Hmm.
that child is always going to love mom and is always going to love dad. So even when I was looking at divorcing my husband and our son was afraid of his dad, that had stuck with me. So my goal in divorce was I wanted my kids to have the best relationship possible with their dad. And I figured it would take about 5 years if he got help and things went well.
Hmm.
And that's about what it took. But this is what, when when you so need to win against the other parent, or this coercive, like you cannot, if your partner, so here's the thing. If you have a partner, if you've been getting along well with your former spouse and you have a new partner who doesn't want you to have anything to do with your former spouse, you need to run
Hmm. Hmm.
because that is the path to harming your kids,
Oh, that's very important what you just said.
right? You need to run because you're going to harm your kids, and your
Hmm.
kids need to come first. And looking back on all this, does a part of you wish that you had never fought him in court when all this started happening, that you would just go on, whatever.
Hmm. Hmm. Right. And the course of control back in that conference of the child support conference, as soon as I put the paperwork on the table, he immediately said, "Okay, she doesn't have to pay child support on the youngest one, but I want those arrears paid faster." Well, they can't make them get paid any faster than what the judge ordered, right?
Yeah, $10 a month. That's the
Oh,
order.
yeah. So really, he didn't gain anything out of this. However, the conference officer said, she said, "I know why you got your kids taken away from you." And I smiled at her and I said, "Really? Through legal kidnapping and false accusations." And that's how I said it. And I said, "You do know he is versing me." And she goes, "What does that mean?" "He is versing me." And then she goes, "Oh." So this definitely sealed it that I knew she was a friend of the wife who works in the courthouse. Why would she say that to me? So I had to call her boss and file a complaint. And he apologized up and down.
So, the really beautiful thing of you having this podcast is it's a public record. If your kids ever get curious about their mom, they can find mom online
Right.
and hear mom's side of the story. Now, is he a good dad? And this is and here's why I'm asking, because if your kids happen to find this, are there things he does well in parenting? And
I,
think carefully before you answer. Are there things he does well as a parent?
well, he's taught them woodworking skills, but he neglect.
Just
Oh, what's that?
so, well, because here's the deal. Kids are attracted to the light,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, you have been stuck in defensive mode for 10 years,
Hmm.
right?
And
Around your kids and all of this,
hmm.
right? Well, you talk like March 2nd, 2015, your kids were taken from you.
Hmm.
So this is where your mind is. But I'm just because if your kids were to listen to this, if they can hear mom actually acknowledge dad is okay in this at something,
Hmm.
it's actually a really good place to start the healing.
Right. I never badmouth the dad. Um, you know, I honestly don't know what was going on over there. I have questionable things that I question what was going on over there. When I was working as a nurse, I carried the dental, but bear in mind, so did the step. She carried dental. And I got braces for the older one, and the middle one desperately needed braces. And the younger one had some issues where he could have used braces on his lower.
Hmm.
And of course, when I lost my job and I was involuntarily terminated, they didn't
Right.
bother putting braces on their teeth. And I think braces are very important health-wise. You know, courts don't agree. My attorney said judges don't care about braces. They should.
But he taught them woodworking, and that's an important skill. There you
Hmm.
go.
Right. But you can't teach your kids to hate the other parent. That's wrong.
No, it is wrong. I totally agree. And it's really a travesty of justice to use the legal system to perpetuate that,
Hmm.
right? And I mean, divorce was catapulted, well, not catapulted, but the law isn't forward thinking.
Hmm.
So when divorce ended up in the court system, Of course, it was put in the civil law court system, which exists for was set up for contract disputes,
Hmm.
property disputes, in a time when people feared going to hell, right?
Uh-huh.
So, right, because that's supposed to be the check to make sure that people are telling the truth, is that they're testifying under oath, be it written or be it oral, because if you lie, you're going to go to hell. That was the era when these rules came into
Hmm.
being. We don't have the same, that fear is largely gone
Hmm.
from our society. So lying is okay. And the other thing about the civil court process is it isn't set up, you're supposed to be rational and logical, and it doesn't take into account how does it function when there are strong emotions,
Hmm.
right? Those two things about, well, and I remember when we had a judge once saying at a training, and she was a small claims judge. So it was, like under, at the time, the limit was five claims less than $5,000.
Uh-huh.
And she actually said, I see more people lie in small claims trials than anywhere else.
Hmm.
She acknowledged it, right? She
Right.
accepted it. But in family law matters,
It's rampant.
because it's this notion, and that's the other thing about civil law, is you win or you lose.
Hmm.
It isn't set up to go, okay, let's figure out what's best for the kids, and then let's apply the law in that context.
Hmm.
And it's heartbreaking to think that a parent is, for whatever reason, be it who they are or be it a new spouse, that they are going to do everything they can to alienate the children from the other parent. Because that just screws up people for life.
Hmm. Yes, unfortunately, my current husband made me watch the movie The Judge. I don't know if you've ever seen that with
I
Robert
haven't.
Duvall and Robert Downey Jr. It's worth seeing because Robert Downey Jr. takes his shirt off. Watch it. Okay, so I didn't want to see it because it's like I'm going through this trauma. I don't want to look at a
Mhm.
judge. But he says, no, this is different. But it, the son started representing the father because the father made a huge mistake, who was the judge. And it was they were showing family dynamics within this judge's family, which was fascinating. So the son really didn't want to represent the father because, the father didn't go to his law school graduation and whatever. And so he ends up representing the father and he tells his father, Dad, just lie on the witness stand. Everybody does. It's like, oh, there it is. Yep.
And like, because in the course of my career, like, I did encounter judges who were really, really good. Most of them I encountered were really good.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even when I say about that client and the social worker, kids always love their parents no matter what. Most judges wouldn't have done what that judge did and taken the time for my client to evolve and grow and get herself together,
Mm-hmm.
right? It was a really beautiful thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I have lots of stories actually like that. I have only a few stories of judges where it was like, oh, please, really?
Mm-hmm.
And it's interesting when I think about judges, like, remember when I was a new lawyer, so we're talking, close to like almost 30 years ago, and I had to appear in civil court in chambers, which is the interim application.
Mm-hmm.
And the judge at the time, he was this elderly gentleman who was a World War II vet.
Oh.
And the convention is with chambers that the lawyers with the most seniority, their arguments get dealt with first, right? So I'm close to the end of the line
Mm,
because I'm so new. So I'm watching this, and this judge, he is giving all the lawyers grief,
mm,
right? Like he was really, like you did this wrong and this wrong and this wrong. And I am quaking in my boots because I'm like, what is he going to say to me? I'm terrified of him. It was it was that, that version of the person up on the dais behind the desk,
mm,
right? That he was all powerful. He was the law.
mhm,
And the application I was doing, I had never seen, I'd inherited the file. I had never seen the woman. She was self-rep. It wasn't a family matter, but I'd heard she had a baby. And there was a woman in the front of their courtroom who had a baby, and then she went out. Like the baby started fussing and she left the courtroom. And she was still out of the courtroom when my matter was called.
mm,
So the judge is calling for her, knowing she's a self-rep.
mm.
And I said, my lord, because in Canada it's my lord or my lady at Superior Court. My lord, I've never met her, but I know she has a baby. There was a woman with a baby in the courtroom, and she went out into the hall when the
Mm,
baby started fussing. So he sent the court clerk, and it was that woman. He didn't give me any BS.
mm.
He just gave me my order. But I didn't, and I think, and there's a couple things there. There's the judge as I'm the arbitrator here, right? Like he was a World War II vet. I don't know if they still have that. But he was somebody who people would complain about him as a judge because he
Mhm,
had that aura.
mhm,
But it wasn't universal. And but there were a few others who I was like, oh please, I don't want to appear in front of this person.
mm,
Oh, right? I'm rolling my eyes. But most of them, and it could be in Canada, you have to be, you have to apply to be a judge. You have to have references. They check your references.
mhm.
You can't have any slurs on your record. There is some training, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think they do have the training in terms of coercive control. And I know what happened. I was very surprised when they started ordering shared parenting.
Mhm,
And I wanted to see, I learned from another judge at a continuing professional development. She spoke about this article that talked about why shared parenting was the best. And so I tried to find it at our Law Society library. It wasn't there. I talked to the librarian and I said, well, the judges are using this. So that same judge who had been so good with my client in the child protection file, he agreed to let his article be copied for me.
mm,
And the librarian gave me it, and she gave me another article so that I could contrast the difference. And the shared parenting article, I think, was first published in a father's rights group
mhm,
magazine. Okay. So it was, the other one was academically rigorous, published in a peer-reviewed journal, and it dealt with conflict. The article the judges were using to make orders for shared parenting, there's nothing about the impact of conflict on kids. Nothing.
mm,
It just said that, oh, if girls, like if kids don't spend equal amounts of time with both their parents, they're going to end up doing poorly in school, career-wise, they're not going to do as well. Oh, and girls will end up being more promiscuous.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
So it was very simplistic. They were citing themselves as the main references. Like it was just, and I would have thought it was fine, but for that really good librarian having looked at it and went and must have thought this is a piece of crap and gave me the other article as well
Mhm.
to contrast.
Because 50-50 isn't cookie cutter.
And it's treated like it should be, right? And it's not. It doesn't take into account what's best for the kids, or that there may be some dads who go, well, I don't want to pay as much child support. So this is the way out of paying as much child support.
See, I like to see that eliminated. Okay, so I'm thinking if you stop fighting over the money of how much, because it's weaponized. They've totally
Mm-hmm.
weaponized it over here.
Well,
And
here too. Yeah.
okay, so there it is. So if a judge says, no one's paying child support, then that might even lessen the fighting completely. I'm thinking it could.
Well, what's interesting with the legal system here, and I mean, and I went in and out of family law, so I can kind of see the trends.
Mhm.
So when I started as a lawyer, you had to argue every case how much child support should be paid.
Mhm.
There were not no objective standards. And that was the era when it was usually um, kids lived usually with one parent primarily, and like, okay, that was how it was. And then we went into guideline support in Canada. You look at the payor's income,
Mhm.
his gross income, where does he live? So taxes are what province is he in? So taxes, how many kids, and this is how much support you pay. Boom. So then I come back into family law and spousal support, like it's shared parenting and spousal support's being ordered.
Mhm.
Because of course, when mom isn't getting, as mom makes less money, and if mom isn't like, it's this tweaking. Okay, so we'll try to prevent less fighting by saying, here's what you pay for child support.
Mhm.
So then what gets introduced is let's do shared parenting. Well, there's a financial consequence to that if mom makes less money, which unfortunately we still have these glass ceilings in our society, in our culture. So that is more commonplace. Okay, because so then, there's less child support. So then mom is bringing a claim for spousal support, and mom is much more likely to be successful. So then in Canada, we get spousal support advisory guidelines. So they're not binding. But if the payor agrees to spousal support or the court orders it, likely the range you're going to get, the amount of time for spousal support, here it is.
Mhm.
So we keep doing these tweaks to avoid the fighting,
Mhm.
and people keep fighting.
Mhm.
And I think it's because, of course, what really matters to people and the emotions are not dealt with. So we keep getting this spiral, which is really, Maryann, why I'm so excited because I'm working with a woman now, and I was describing some of the exercises I do with my clients, and she said, there are products here, Kim.
Mhm.
So I am just about to launch a ritual for divorce kit, which helps people deal with what the courts never deal with, which of course then helps you make better decisions about what matters most.
Mhm.
You're less likely to get caught up in that spiral of, the weaponization and the court system. So I am just about there.
That's awesome.
And
Most
right, like, and it's really, it's going to be 24 US plus shipping.
Hmm.
to buy. And it's easy to do. Like, because there isn't, the thing is, we have rituals for absolutely everything except divorce,
Hmm.
right? Like you mentioned Mother's Day earlier, right? Like it's a ritual, kids reach out to moms on Mother's Day or spend time with moms on Mother's Day. Even that. Like, yeah, we have the big ticket, the weddings, the funerals, the baby showers.
Hmm.
But even, like, oh, high school graduation, Halloween, Christmas traditions, they're all ritual. And humans need rituals to process significant events. So,
Yeah, that's great. I'm so glad I had you on again. It's just so great talking to you.
well, and you know what? And I think this one today, of course, I kind of interviewed you for most of it,
Yeah.
which is a way for the listeners to get to really understand your passion.
Hmm.
Like this is not a desire to destroy, to be destructive. My takeaway is you're wanting other people to be aware so that they can make good decisions and avoid the pain.
Hmm.
And not just the pain, because the other thing I'm taking away from it is the stress of this caused physical health issues for you.
Hmm.
It's not isolated. And so for other people to know, if they're in the early stages of this, your story, you can either fight and knowing, like if you know what is going to be involved, and you can make an informed decision that's right for you,
Hmm.
or you can do something else and be at peace. And that's a big part of your story. So I want to thank you, actually.
Oh, well, thank you for coming on because I didn't know this was going to turn into an interview of me. And, you know,
I didn't either.
I, but I had written this book in 2020 called Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough. So people can see what really happened. It's more of a handbook for people going through family court, especially if you start representing yourself, you know what I mean? Because my dad had said, well, if you represent yourself, you know what they say about pro ses, they're all crazy. Yeah, it was crazy to win in Superior Court on the child support. That's really huge. Who wins on that?
Mm-hmm.
I beat that attorney and I beat that judge. I'm so proud of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because if I not won that, Attorney Kim, I'd be in and out of jail every once a month, maybe every 2 months.
Right.
So I totally thank my Superior Court attorney. I won't mention her name because then she'll be bombarded. But I
But I
totally.
think though, if people listened to the end of this and they're curious, I'm sure if they sent you an email, you
Mhm.
would say, "This is the name of my attorney."
Right, right.
And I mean, likewise, like I'm actually getting my first prototypes of my ritual for divorce kit tomorrow.
Hmm.
So people can reach out. I'm redoing the website. It's going to be beautiful and it's going to be for sale there. But if before then, because it's actually like I did it with a fellow a couple of weeks ago so that I could record instructions.
Hmm.
And he was like, "Oh, everything, it's very little is going to change. Like most of the important stuff will still be there." Yes. So people who are really fearing that it's going to be this huge, huge shift, and that's what the legal system promotes, me against you.
Hmm.
It shifts your perspective
How can
and helps you
people?
process.
Oh, that website you were mentioning with this kit. How can they? Can you give me that website address or is it too soon?
Well, I think it's emailing me right
Okay.
now is the best way. And Kim, I'll give you Kim at gentlewaydivorce.com.
Okay. I'll put that in the podcast notes. And I'm so glad you came on. So don't jump off. Slam the Gavel is a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these courtrooms. I'm your host, Maryann Petri. You can find me on Spotify, YouTube. Please like and subscribe, Apple, iTunes, iHeartRadio, Google, and again, other platforms I don't even know about. Again, feel free to buy me a coffee to help keep this podcast going. Thank you, Attorney Kim Korven. This was fun.
It was fun. It was
Yeah.
great.
Thank you so much.